Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's Rushcliffe Borough Council Corporate Overview Group meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so for the millions of people watching around the world, welcome. Recording the meeting will be available afterwards because you'll be that much fun, you're going to want to watch it again when you get home. May I remind you to switch your microphones on and off when you are speaking, and then when you're finished, that'd be great. So to do the round of introductions tonight, we have on my right, as always, Charlotte Tack, who will hit me when I'm doing something wrong, no doubt. Sarah Whitaker, welcome back as Service Manager of Finance. Ed Palmer, welcome again. You seem to be calling the meeting. We're just going to put your phone on the agenda. Communication and Customer Services Manager. And we've got Katie here for the first time here as Finance Business Partner. So welcome along. And we've got Tracy Coop, as always, to do all our minutes. So thank you very much. So going to go to the main agenda tonight. Number one, any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Williams this evening.
Thank you. And number two is declaration of interest. Does any councillor or officer have a declaration of interest they wish to declare? Good. That's all I need to know. Extra brownie points. You don't have to speak for as long tonight. So item 3. Minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of September 2022. Anyone got any comments they wish to raise about the minutes? All happy, true and accurate record? Under the stare from Tracy if you say otherwise. No? All good. Thank you very much. That's carried. So on to item 4, which is the Finance and Performance Management Quarter 2 report. So who's going first? Who wants to go on first of it? You see, Ed's been nice. He wants to stay to the very end. He loves being to the very end. So, over to you.
This is my bit, I believe. If I put my microphone on, okay?
Oh, yeah, see.
Okay, so thank you for having me this evening. Nice to meet you all. And I believe you've had a copy of the report, so I'm just going to give you a brief summary of the main points. So for this financial year, the overall budget variance is expected to be a saving of 0.831 million. We can see more detail on that in Appendix A. Most notably, we're proposing to earmark 0.67 million for the reduction in pooled investments, which I'll talk about shortly. If you take a look at Table 1, that shows you the main variations. So we've got a projected overspending contingency, which is currently where we're projecting the increase to utilities and pay award, and also agency costs from planning and refuse. These are offset mostly by increased investment income due to rising interest rates. Also at the bottom of the table there, you'll notice the business rate is 860,000, which is what's given the main rise to the variance. Again, in Appendix A and Appendix B, you can find more detail about all the variances. And in Appendix E, we've got the position on the special expenses budget, which is currently expected to be 61,000 above budget, mostly due to the increase in utilities and also some footpath maintenance. So looking at the capital position, you can look at that in more detail in Appendix C and Appendix D. But in summary, we're expecting an underspend of 4.98 million, which is primarily from just under 2 million for support for registered housing providers, which will be slipping into next year. And additionally, we've got 1 million on the Bingham Leisure Hub, which is due to contingencies which aren't fully committed at this time, but it is expected that that will be spent. In terms of capital receipts, we've got a potential deferral of income from Hollygate. However, we have got enough internal resources, so it will mean that we don't have to borrow externally. Still, update on the current pressures. You'll be aware that the staff pay negotiations are now complete, and that's been agreed. So we had reported some of this last month, and the remaining shortfall is included within the finance and corporate projection. In addition, we've got the pressure of inflation, which is expected to get up to 14% potentially. And obviously the biggest concern on that is around fuel and utilities. Collection rates are slightly below target, but we are monitoring these and there's not any concerns to flag at present. So, review of the transformation programme targets. We're currently projecting a shortfall of 0.65 million and 0.169 million for the crematorium and Bingham due to some delays with those projects. The multi-assets investment, this has worsened, and we're currently expecting, Q2 reporting a net reduction of 1 million, but that's actually worsened since this report was written by another 0.429 million. So that's what we referred to at the beginning of the report with the underspend that we've got. Most of that will be going to towards that shortfall. So in conclusion on the report, there's lots of uncertainty and risk at the minute. We've got the new Prime Minister and we're expecting the settlement on Thursday. So hopefully we'll know a bit more by then. The business rates pool is giving us the main budget efficiency of 0.831 million. And we're mainly using that to cover the pool funds reduction. Position on capital's positive. We don't need to externally borrow this year. And I think that's about it for the finance report. If anybody's got any questions.
That's great. Thank you very much for the report, Katie. So open up the floor first for any questions. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just interested to note the underspends on the capital. I'm looking on page 31 where I'm assuming that's the explanation for the underspend on the RHPs, which seems fine. I'm just interested, the Bingham Leisure Centre, where it's talking about delays on completion. What's the reason for the delays on the completion, and is that contingency money likely to be spent eventually?
Yeah, so in paragraph 4.12, it just talks about the delays there, mainly external factors, so shortage in labour, resources and materials, which I think has been previously reported. In terms of the contingency, yes, we're expecting to spend that in full this year.
I suppose the cheeky question is why? If all the contingencies are going to be spent, does that still represent good budgeting for the project in the first place?
Well, I think as you're quite aware, Councillor, we have to have some contingency in place for the unexpected, which can happen in life. In your extensive career in the building sector, I'll tell you, he's one of those tonight. Don't worry about it, okay? We have to put up with you now after those questions. Don't worry on that one. No, but let's just anything you wish to add, well, rather than we have got cameras, so if you want to hit him, must be afterwards. But is there any question, anything else you want to add to that? Or happy now? Okay. Any other questions you want to raise? Oh, Sarah, do you want to jump in?
I just want to say that whilst we've got the contingency position at the moment, obviously the delays will erode into that position. So whilst we're not saying we're necessarily going to use the contingency in full, at this point we don't want to commit to a figure that we think we're going to have as a saving out of contingency because of those delays that are unknown at this stage.
Sensible answer.
I'll say get a sensible question, get a sensible answer, maybe. Councillor Alland.
Thank you. I don't guarantee this is a sensible question. Support for registered housing providers, there's a big variance there. Can someone explain why? Because obviously it seems a bit unfortunate, but there may be a reason. I don't totally understand.
I believe that the The funds for registered housing providers were supplemented recently from a Section 106 receipt, and I think officers are looking at the moment into options for utilising those funds, but obviously the schemes need to be looked into in some depth before that they can be undertaken.
But presumably that when this was already budgeted at the beginning of the year, there was a plan. It wasn't, I mean, there's maybe additional money now, but there must have been a plan when this was budgeted.
It's not necessarily always a plan for the start of the year, but the capital programme will include amounts that we propose to spend. And I can look into some more detail into what those schemes are, but my understanding is that the officers are actively seeking schemes to spend that money on.
Thank you, Chairman. My question relates to the transformation programme references in paragraph 4.12. We have sort of come across the transformation efficiencies in a number of reports and other committees and groups as well, and Sarah is aware we discuss it at the governance scrutiny group as well. My question really is around the timings of the transformation strategy and its duration. We talk about the Bingham Hub and the crematorium and so on, and these big projects, but is there anything else planned in the pipeline in terms of transformation program efficiencies to mitigate longer term potential deficiencies at the moment? Because I've only heard those two, possibly one or two others as well previously, but my question is, are there any further longer term plans around the transformation strategy?
You are correct. Yes, like you say, a number of years ago we did have a plan, and it usually does span the equivalent of the MTFS, so a 5-year period. And as you quite rightly state, the two biggest projects in there are the crematorium and Bingham that are the main focus at the moment. And it does, at the moment, look as though it's sort of tailing off those schemes that are all coming to an end. So what we're working on at the moment is coming up with options to put into the transformation plan for this budget setting cycle. So when you attend the member workshops on the 5th and 6th of December, that you should be presented then at that point with some options for transformation savings.
Just for a quick follow-up, Sarah or Katie, slightly unrelated but related. One of the internal audit findings around our project management frameworks was it was considerably out of date. I know that's being addressed moving forwards, but again, looking at transformation strategy programs, efficiency of bid projects and so on, I think it is critical that we have that done as quickly as possible. So I know we've already noted it at the governance meeting, but really raising it in terms of any deficiencies that we may get. I don't know whether there is a correlation between that framework and any impact it's having, but I think they do, in my experience anyway, align very closely. So we have to make sure we're running them very efficiently and getting the maximum out of our transformation strategy.
Just to confirm that we have got in progress at the moment, officers working on refreshing that framework.
Come in. Okay, so there's obviously some exceptions on there which are listed on the appendix item, just for the these people watching. Yeah, I was going to bring Ed in afterwards just to finish off the finance ones. I mean, just because this has impact on finance before we come on to break it up. So we've got the first item that I can see under the exception really is the household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting. But as I think the explanation to me does sound a good one, which is obviously that with the wet weather we had over the summer, I know for certain in my garden, I'm sure I was had the same, there was less to put in there because nothing was dead. So it wasn't much to do, cut back and what have you. But looking at it in terms of recycling rates, I think the fact we're still over the target, and I do know from other councils that they are much further behind the curve that we are. So we're still in the right direction. Well, I'm sure we'll get this waste strategy through any day now from the government, so we can progress to make it even better. But I think what is good to see is the amount of household waste dropping. So of course we saw the increase during COVID when more people work at home and put the bins. Now that is coming down with more people returning to work and hopefully their habits changing with our education of what they can recycle. With recycling week being, was it last week? I think that's recycling week. Maybe that's going to encourage even more people to know what they can recycle. Milk top bottles for one. So the second one, I think the percentage use of community facilities. So that does have an impact on our finances. Again, for what's been noted down in terms of it's still a bit difficult after COVID and getting back up there, but we have got the new booking system in place, and it's quite pleasing to see the amount of comments about the going on to what you can book, especially the arena, and of course the new facility at Rushden Country Parks. I'm sure that will bring some good money in, and the householder planning application process within target times. So I know we had a bit of conversations about Charlotte as well there, which can look into more. Did we get anything more back from planning department on their rates at all? On we had a chat, didn't we, about the pre-meeting? Be on the spot here. Which my concern obviously was the fact that they were quite a bit down on the planning application process, but obviously we have had quite a few staffing issues in the planning department, which of course every council's had, and unfortunately with the loss of Andrew Peregrine, a tragic loss, and the team is on the catch up a lot with planning application. I'm starting to see them come through quite a bit more quicker now as well. I'm sure every council is. I'm sure that target will get back up ready for next time. And the potential calls answered in 60 seconds. So I know the customer strategy was discussing communities, which Ed, you had a lovely evening talking about, didn't you? I think looking at it, there'll be a lot more calls. I know the council, same we saw the county council with the government schemes that brought in around rebates and funding. There was a lot more calls that we were dealing with to answer that, which of course we didn't expect. So didn't have the staffing in place, which we couldn't expect to with the short notice. So I think the team did very well to cope there. I'm sure we'll get onto that community later, but there's a lot of work being done to move that in the right direction in terms of getting those percentages down and obviously redirect people to the website. So I think to me that's performance one. So obviously we're going to get on to Ed's part now, but is there anything else people want to ask of Katie before we move on to Ed's section? No. Okay, over to you then, Ed.
Good evening, Chairman, councillors. Thanks, Councillor Wheeler. Yeah, you've touched on a lot of what I was going to start on there. Really, Appendix G this evening for those gives a bit more clarity to the data and the reports. Just starting with those two reports sections, then in the strategic scorecard, as you touched upon, percentage of household waste. I think the only part to add there is, I mean, yeah, a drop on average 31 kilograms per household. I mean, that's really, really significant. We're aware of that. I think the only thing that we're being mindful is, as a council, as ever, communication and recycling and our waste services will increase in line with that. So if you get similar spells going forward, sadly with climate change, etc., if it is more common that comes up, then in line with our wider external communication strategy, then will increase the amount of communications around other ways you can recycle, what you can do to try and make sure that figure isn't hit quite so much. But as you've already pointed out, Environment Bill next year, we really need to know those outcomes so we can start making a longer, medium to long-term plan. Onto the community facilities, as you said, I mean, the room we're in this evening, to the point in case, really, sort of further marketing promotion, once the AV system was secured and in place, has been really, really important. We needed that system to be there, the confidence in the operation of it before we could go out and do wider marketing. So that's been really key, and that's why you've seen a change in terms of that marketing really ramping up in recent weeks. Moving on to then the operational scorecard points, I think 4 further targets to look at here. That percentage of household planning applications processed within target times. As we said, new service manager is due to start later this month. Newly created operations manager. This is helping move the team in a much more stable direction and getting that 60% marker up much more towards the target. And then onto the number of calls in 60 seconds. I think, again, as you hinted about, I mean, the council tax energy rebate calls last year was so significant. I saw firsthand the complexity, length of time in some cases it took to answer the calls, the really, really complex ones. And I mean, that's a reason as to why we were at a low of 24% in under 60 seconds back in May. That's risen to 66% in September, and then 72% last month. So you can see the knock-on effect of that, and we'll prepare for that again because we're aware of the time we're in at the moment when people need support and the government may look at other options again. So we'll be more prepared for that should something be announced at short notice that we'll need to implement. Of course, customer access strategy is helping with that as well. That's been discussed in recent weeks. So customers were continually signposting now to digital services ever more, and ways in which we can learn more about why and the barriers to moving on to online services instead of giving us a call. Just wanted to discuss as well the income generated from community buildings, similar fashion to the community facilities. In it's a difficult trading environment. It is going to continue to be that. Confidence in line with COVID habits. We need to combat cost of living crisis and expectations around that, and people obviously generally being in the habit of using meeting rooms less. But it is helpful in terms of that we have got a modern facilities that we think that we can really market, and you've probably, as I said, seen that in recent weeks, that there has been a heightened interest in those facilities. The new refurbished meeting room at the Country Park, again, it's got a unique location next to the lake there, a real plus. So again, elements that we can really hone in on and push going forward. The income generated then parks, pitches, open spaces, probably the figures here don't reflect as such the main football season starting in September. So the income should improve over the last 2 months. 2 pitches at Gresham Sports Pavilion are unavailable due to the capital works programme. And they've even got there just a credit note being checked over for Bridgefield Cricket. So maybe Bridgefield, I should say, for cricket parking. So maybe put it all together and the figure is maybe lower than is actually a true reflection of where we are at the moment. But we can come back to that at our next meeting. Just to note, we're obviously a little bit shorter in terms of maybe some of the performance areas that we usually cover. This is to just, in perspective, put it, the reporting timetable that this group receives. It has to be obviously ever more timely and close to the end of the quarter. So we possibly it means that some of the indicators aren't on the sheet there in the report this evening that there might be in the past. So it's just to make sure we put that context in there, so you're aware of why some items are maybe not available on this occasion. But are there any points you want to start the discussion there, Chair?
Yeah, I've got a few up around that first. Yeah, I think a couple bits for me. So on Bridgefield, I know you say we're raising the receipt for there. Is there a reason we don't use that more for when there's the big football games, for example? Because you just see cars driving round and round, obviously adding to pollution where they could be obviously going to park on there. Do we have a specific reason for that?
My understanding from an events point of view is partly it's due to obviously football season, the time of year. This time of year now, you've got potential long-term damage that you could do to that area. If it's not managed correctly, it's much more of a seasonal venue. So you used it, receive a lock in the park, problems in the park, except extra parking and so on. I think there's other considerations just around if it's used on a lot more of a regular basis, what the knock-on effect that is then to its use as a park. So I think that's mainly around it, but I can double check that with the events. For the last time I spoke to them, that was the theory.
Yeah, no, it does make sense around and I say about certain times of the year, just like I said, the amount of cars you see just driving around, I was trying to find car parking because it's not the most spacious amount around here to do. I just thought as a way for us to bring some income in, so maybe we'll just look at that if it can be done without, like I say, causing the long-term damage. For the customer, for the customer service centre, more for the calls getting in. I know you talked about it at length at the communities, but I know the chair and vice chair aren't here tonight at that meeting, so just to talk on that slightly. What's the plan in terms of more digital communication, in terms of getting more people online and perhaps an app like we see at the county, just because, like I say, to hopefully help compensate for the amount of calls we're going in?
To try and summarise a lot of what the strategy deals with, we're gleaning information first of all now as to why people are not calling us, not engaged with us online in certain ways. So the percentage of people that are calling us that are digitally engaged but choose not to go down that route for whatever reason. We've started this even in the last couple of weeks, asking customers as to why they haven't done that particular item, that task online today, and trying to understand the barriers to it or what we need to do. It's already gleaned some very interesting examples of even down to our web forms, in some cases needing to be improved, so that people can find information easier and or just complete that query much quicker. So we'll glean that information first, and then over time we'll be able to try and implement what we can of actually looking at what services we can make not digital only, but certainly point people further down the digital route. So I don't think there's an appetite at the moment in terms of a separate app as such, but the fact that we are as an organisation reviewing our website as we speak, with a view to that being relaunched at some point, that will really help direct customers ever faster to a digital option, particularly around the search engine facility, for example, on the website. That will be hopefully transformed in terms of really helping people find what they need a lot quicker. So without going into great depth about what the customer access strategy is looking at specifically, there's certainly very broad themes that will help drive people a lot more online a lot quicker if that's the route they want to go down.
Thank you very much. That got any creative juices flowing for more questions? No? So, there you see we've got there. So the 4 recommendations are in front of us. A, that we as a group note the expected revenue budget efficiency for the year of 0.831 million and proposals to earmark this for cost pressures, which was noted in paragraph 4.1. The capital budget efficiencies of 4.98 million, including the reprofiling provisions totaling 1.965 million, of which 0.465 million to 23-24 and 1.5 million to 24-25, which was referenced in paragraph 4.7. Letter C, the expected outturn position for special expenses to be in 61k above budget, which was referenced in 4.5. And D is that the group considers whether scrutiny is required for identified performance exceptions. So for me, I will remove those recommendations. I think we've gone through about scrutiny for the identified performance. I'm quite happy with what's been said about what we're doing around those ones, around the ones we need to get back up to the target. Unless there's anyone against those recommendations, all happy if we go to the vote. So all in favour? Take that as unanimous. Thank you very much. So thank you much for that. You're on to, but oh God, we didn't expect that, did we? Okay. We'll meet in the pub afterwards. After we get through this. So, thank you very much for coming. Okay, so on to item 5, the customer feedback annual report. Over to Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Just by way of a brief reminder before we open the floor up. So this is your annual customer feedback report. By customer feedback, we mean complaints and compliments that members of the public, residents in our borough, have provided to the council to feedback on the services that they've used, they've requested, they've had in one way or another. So during 2021 to 22, so the previous full year, we received 57 complaints. 21% of those, which is actually 12 of those complaints, were escalated. So for those who have not been involved in this group for very long, or just do not know, we have a 2-stage complaints process. So at the very first stage, when complaints come into the council, they're addressed by our lead specialists, so the person in control of each team. If somebody remains dissatisfied with that complaint, they are escalated up to director level, and that's where I get involved in making sure that those investigations have been thorough, that the complaint has been responded to accurately, we've covered everything that the complainant is bringing up, and that there is nothing that we can have learnt or changing our processes and such like. There is a sort of an additional level to that, because if complainants are not happy at that point, whilst the council's process have been exhausted, we do have a local government ombudsman who they can complain to, and I shall come on to that in more detail in a moment. So whilst those numbers are marginally higher than the last few years, overall very low, especially in comparison with other authorities, and I'm not at all alarmed by, I think, the one more complaint we had this year as opposed to last year. Balancing that out and bearing in mind that people generally don't write to us to tell us that they are happy, but we have received 127 compliments about our services over that same period of time. Responding to complaints within target times remains consistent. And in terms of those complaints that did go to our second stage, 6 of those were planning related, 3 were in environmental health, and then we had 1 each for housing, homelessness and council tax. As I mentioned a moment ago, there is the option for those people who remain dissatisfied at stage 2 to take their complaint to the local government ombudsman. So 10 complaints were made by residents of Rushcliffe over this year. 7 were in planning, 2 for benefits and council tax, and 1 for environmental health. 7 decisions were issued. None of those complaints were upheld, and the council was not required to take any action on those. Your report shows that we compare very well in comparison to other councils locally in terms of our complaints going to the Ombudsman. I am more than happy to answer any questions that you have about our customer feedback over the 2021-22 year.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Any questions that people would like to raise? Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chairman. Charlotte, thank you for the overview. Couple of points from me. One is regarding, I'm sure it's not massive, but the materiality of the compensation payments. What sort of magnitude are we looking at? And the second one is around the complaints which are justified. What, if any, is the follow-up action and how is that monitored?
Okay, so first of all, to point out that we do not pay out compensation very often. In fact, I can think of 2 instances in the past. It is about out-of-pocket expenses. So where somebody has been disadvantaged and is materially out of pocket, they have spent money that they would not have otherwise spent. We tend to refund that so that they are no longer out of pocket. I can't think of any examples where we have paid compensation where there hasn't been a direct relationship with an out-of-pocket expense. In terms of justified complaints, it's all about lessons learned. What can we as officers change about the way that we work? How can we change our internal processes? What can we do to improve our service so that this type of complaint doesn't happen again? So that goes back to lead specialist, it goes back to teams, and they will discuss that complaint and its findings and what they could be doing to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Charlotte. Just a quick come back on that. Has there ever been any external follow-up on any of these justified complaints when it's gone outside of the council sort of framework, if any have indeed?
In terms of the local government ombudsman, the local government ombudsman makes a judgment on injustice and whether there's been any damage to the complainant. So they don't necessarily look at complaints in the same way that we do, but when they do make a judgment that is against how we've investigated a complaint where we have actually made a mistake, then yes, they will quite often ask for us to make either compensation, an apology, or a recompense in some other way to the complainant.
At all? No. Okay, I think just on record, I think the fact that it's obviously really welcome the fact that we haven't got anything to go to Ombudsman. We don't want anything to go there. I'm quite surprised that 1 or 2 of those councils haven't got more than they have, but there we are, knowing how those councils operate. But I think for ourselves, it's really good that you know, at the end of the day, we are defined by our reputation with our residents. And I think we saw in the report we had at last meeting about the not last meeting, one before, about the or maybe it was at communities, if I remember, the feedback from the customer last survey we had with the reputation of council is really high for people who actually notice about Rushcliffe and the service we give. So the fact we've got 127 compliments, you're right, you hardly ever actually get people to take the time to actually say well done. It's quite rare. So when you say 127, it's probably times by 10 with the amount of people who actually would give feedback and just actually don't write in. So that should be really commended. The recommendation in front of us is that we accept as a true record of the customer feedback in 21-22 in regards to complaints. So I'm all happy to move that. Everyone happy? All those in favour? Thank you very much. That was unanimous. Thank you. Item 6 is feedback from scrutiny chairman. So I shall start on my right with Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. The Growth and Development Scrutiny Group on the 21st of September, we had 2 items, and the main sort of substantive one related to sewerage infrastructure and discharge in Rushcliffe. We had 2 visitors come to speak to us, Richard Cooper from the Environment Agency, who told us about the strategic overview of the Environment Agency and how the discharges are made, and also told us that the sewerage coming from Cotgrave that used to be dealt with by the Copgrave treatment plant is now piped through to Ratcliffe-on-Trent and treated in Ratcliffe-on-Trent, as well as, surprisingly, the sewage from Ratcliffe-on-Trent as well. Anyway, moving quickly on. As far as I'm aware, and as far as he is aware, it all seems to be working fine most of the time, although there might be a few minor issues. We had Chris Bramley from Severn Trent also telling us about mainly the linking in with the developers. And he was confirming to us that Severn Trent aren't able to refuse any connection by developers. But obviously we were concerned about the facts or as to whether the systems are able to cope with all the additional demand on new housing developments that are taking place. And so, there's quite a long discussion about that. And we managed to get a commitment out of him that be able to get available more information where customers and indeed the council wants to inquire about different systems, that where it's permissible for the information to be given, then they will do so. So one of the actions was that we would set up a better method of communication of that information. I'll also mention the Environment Agency were considering a request for us to visit the fish ponds. Yes, at Calverton, I think it is. Yeah. So those were the two actions. However, we thought that there was still some ongoing work and more investigation required. So the intention is to invite them back to a further meeting where maybe we can ascertain any further more detailed information as regards the sewerage, because I think we were all concerned on all sides that the sewerage system is able to cope with the vast additional development that Rushcliffe is undertaking at the moment. The second item related to COVID-19 business recovery, and that's obviously consisted largely of complementing the council staff on excellent work that's been undertaken during the COVID crisis, but also we heard then about the future of allocation of funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund over the next 3 years, which will provide best part of £3 million, just under £3 million for the benefit of Rushcliffe, which obviously will be very welcome. And in fact, actually, that'll be the subject of a future item. Can't remember without looking at the work programs, either January or March. I think it was January. That just about covers it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it is interesting, especially with the point you raised about the impact on residential. I know Severn Trent do a lot of work in East Leek, for example, aren't they, to upgrade the system there with the impact, but also the unexpected impact. For example, the work you talked about Copgrave to the sewage work, said that an impact with the amount of water coming downstream into the Grantham Canal, which I didn't realise. I was on the site meeting with people from the Canal River Trust and the Grantham Society about what the water levels in the Grantham Canal in Galveston. That was one of the reasons they put to it, which you perhaps wouldn't think naturally, but as a consequence of those works, so that being communicated perhaps better, that they would be able to do some more work to mitigate that. Is interesting. So Penny, did you have a point you want to comment? Okay.
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Scotty, anything you want to add?
No, I wasn't there, Chair.
Oh, okay, that's why then. Okay, what do I mean? I'm catching it quiet. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, I was asked.
Oh, okay, no worries at all. Councillor Verdi, I understand if you need to give a brief due to your dental condition, feel free to.
Yes, I do, although I've got lots of notes, but I'll try not to read them all. We met eventually on the 1st of November. It was a delayed meeting from September, but as always, it was a packed agenda. We received reports on our internal audit activities, our Streetwise subsidiary, the risk management process, our going concern status, as well as our capital and investment strategy. Very brief highlights for some of those areas. The internal audit report, we have 10 audits planned for this year. We were updated on 3 of those, which is the risk management, project management and environmental areas. And I'm pleased to say they were all very positive, and particularly risk management, which was substantive ratings on both design and effectiveness. So that was very pleasing. Although, as noted earlier, when I mentioned to Sarah and Katie, our project management framework does need updating, and that was noted by internal audit. One other item that we discussed during this particular meeting was the Redmond review, and without going into too much detail, this was an assessment and report which was presented to the group last year, which proposed the appointment of an independent member to the governance scrutiny group. And we had a very healthy debate about this particular proposal and recommendation, although we didn't agree with it at the time. But we understand that may become mandatory next year, so that will be coming back to the group for consideration. But overall internal audit on target and as planned, and no major issues. Streetwise, as we're aware, has now come in-house, but we were presented with the report for the last financial year, and some key highlights around the governance arrangements, business development and our accreditations and so on were discussed by the group. It was pleasing to see some of the net liabilities coming down, pension liabilities coming down for the group, rather for the company. I think despite the loss of a major contract from one of our major customers, the underlying trend for growth for Streetwise is positive. It went down from 3.1 million to 2.8 million due to a loss of a major contract, but the overall trend is actually up from 2.3 to 2.5 million if we take that particular contract out. So key highlights really and recommendations which were made to Cabinet were around the monitoring of KPIs and performance as it's integrated back into this frameworks within the council. Obviously, in terms of ongoing governance, I think it will be outside the remit of the governance scrutiny group in future, possibly partly this group and Cabinet, obviously, in other areas. So that was probably the last time we'll see that one. Risk management, as I said, was extremely positive with a substantive rating in terms of our model approach and so on frameworks. And we we had some training recently for members and members of the group and the council's group, which was very positively received as well. Going concern status, which looks at our financial position, projected financial position and governance arrangements. Again, it was a very positive assessment by our Section 151 officer, and that was noted by the group. And that's despite all of the recent complications and difficulties around COVID and our financial performance. And finally, our capital investment strategy. I think that some of the key highlights are that we've had high balances, high returns, investment returns for obvious reasons because of the higher interest rates recently, and we've also had higher balances due to underspend on our capital programme and also various other reasons. So that's all very healthy, but looking forward, our MTFS, medium-term financial strategy, has to ensure that in the event of external borrowing, which is highly unlikely, of course, it'll cost us more as well if we want to borrow from the external market. So overall, though, very positive performance. Once again, And there was one other highlight I was going to bring out. This is now a quarterly report, which we receive as opposed to 6 monthly due to new CIPFA recommendations. But as I said, in summary, very positive. So those are some of the key highlights. I don't know if Councillor Gowland wants to add to any of that. I think you were at the meeting.
Yeah,
but-
yeah.
Happy to take any questions on that, but
Probably was. Okay, so thank you very much to that, Councillor Verdi. I think the point you raised about the external person for, I think when we raised also last call review, it's good that that's back on the radar. I know it might be mandatory, but I think it's really important to look at that. So it's really great that you are. And yeah, thanks for the comprehensive update. In terms of communities, I was chair and the vice chair aren't here this evening, but I watched the meeting. Well, I was one of the, I think I was 2.6 million on the list of people watching that night. There was 2 substantive items on the agenda. One was the external communication strategy, and one was the customer access strategy. So as if we planned that to be quite coincidental, wasn't it? So we'll take credit for that. I mean, the external communication strategy, which I remember we talked about in my time chairing that meeting, was to bring into effectively look at how we communicate to our residents, and it was highlighted as part of the customer survey results that came back that we had to really look at how we are communicating to make sure we are communicating to our residents how they want to be communicated with in the lovely year of 2022 and going forwards up to 25. So it was quite a long discussion. I think it was about 45 minutes, which in terms of talking about how it's going out there, I think what's crucial was that the plan is going to really look at things like social media and adapting to the new trends, not just Facebook, Twitter, but maybe these like TikTok and Twitter and not Twitter, Instagram, all these other ones to look at to see how we can get on those effectively and to communicate with more people. So that was quite good. And obviously and then looking at things like Rusky reports, is that still important in terms of how we communicate there, considering the cost there. So I know that's going to be reviewed as well. The other item was the customer access strategy. So that the previous one ended in 2017, expired, and obviously waiting for. They were reviewing it at the time, and with COVID, everything else pushed it back slightly to make sure this all go forwards now. So effectively, what most of the group were talking about was the fact that it's really important to still have people on the phones, and the customer centre. I mean, it's only open limited hours on the avenue, which is partly down to cost, but also partly down to the amount of people actually do walk in, and the amount of people who are communicating that way. So it was asked by the group to sort of consider those opening hours, make sure they're still relevant, but obviously there is a cost to that element in terms of the staff in that centre more. So they're going to be sort of reviewing that in terms of demand and people on the phone. And obviously, as I touched on before with Ed about, they sort of talked about looking more how we can encourage more people online to get the questions they want answered straight away. Because a lot of calls are about things that people can find straight away on the internet. So we want to make sure we are signposting people effectively, so if they can find out themselves by going online, they can do. And then talk about the work programme. So in January, they've got the establishment of the Youth Council as it stands, the corporate enforcement policy, and then in March, the Carbon Management Plan and Environment Policy. It's probably a poor job to summarise that from what I remember from the meeting all that time ago, but as Gareth isn't here, I think that was a complete trail record that you can't dispute me otherwise, but that's the update from there. Any questions which I probably can't answer, but I'll do my best to. Councillor Gowland.
Again, I may not have completely heard. Just like to stress, I mean, I've had residents complain I've had to write to the council because of their inability to access council services because they can't use the internet and they have to go to the office and it's not open very often. So I think you have to remember that not everybody uses the internet.
Absolutely, which is why I think they're going to be reviewing that to see is it fit for purpose. Yeah, no, actually, no, sorry. I think I said they are going to be reviewing that. I think any way you want feedback into that, I'm sure we're really welcomed, and same with other residents as well to get feedback in. I think the problem is, as you know, it's getting that balance, see how many people we can open for, make sure it's cost effective, but at the same time that we are delivering the service. So I know that's a week on to review, but no, it's a point that obviously needs making. So thank you for that. Anything else from anyone? No. Okay then. So number 7, feedback from lead officers. Lead officer, if you wish to go on.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
There you go. That's the kind of report we need, isn't it? So on to number 8, which is consideration of scrutiny group work programs. So first of all, if we go through the scrutiny matrix that have come through, so the first one is from Councillor Way that came through as via the motion we had at full council, which was the protection and enhancement of hedges. As I recall, it was unanimous at full council to support that, so that we will add that into the programme, which will go into January to growth and development. Everyone happy with that? Okay. Next one, request for scrutiny comes from the Service Manager for Economic Growth and Property. So this is an update on the fair and development. Anything you want to add onto this one, Charlotte? Or do we just ramble?
No, I've got nothing further to add other than what is written in there, other than to say that it's an opportunity not just to see where we are at that particular point, but also if you look at the timing, it's obviously going to be a fairly substantial development over the next couple of years. You've got a borough council election next May, so the way it's been timed there, you've got new councillors coming in, and actually it sets the context for them moving forward.
Yes, it's down for to be in March to be scrutinised at the moment. I think you're quite right. The substantial amount of development going on there and the investment going in, we've got to make sure that that is right. I think we've seen before with other developments in the past, such as Sharp Hill, to be perfectly honest, where perhaps hasn't been scrutinised or wasn't as it could be. So we need to be absolutely certain that on these sort of developments we are doing all we can to make sure it's on the right track. So, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I think I'm just highlighting the point that this would also be an opportunity in scrutinising the development to just clarify that there are sufficient community facilities and supporting infrastructure being included in the project as well. I realise that obviously most of that will have been done at the planning application stage, but the whole purpose of scrutiny is just to clarify that it's going according to A, the planning permission, but B, doesn't stop you asking, is there anything that's missing that could be looked at by developers or whoever to improve the lot of the new residents that will be on that development. Interesting, yeah, with it being in March, whether that is the appropriate or whether we can delay it for maybe a new councillors coming in, perhaps. That's up for debate. I've got a couple of suggestions which only came hot off the press this week, so can discuss a matrix which could replace that. But I'm fairly open as to whether it still carries on in March or whether we want to delay it till the new term.
In 23 strategic task and review of the draft business continuity strategy as it stands. Then May, again, all the standing items. And then the diversity annual report, an update on the equality and diversity strategy in May, if we're still here. And in September, all the standing items and the health and safety annual report. We're all happy with that for the moment. So governance scrutiny. So you're never, well, too late to change everyone now. If we wanted, we could do it just to see Charlotte want to hit me, but we won't. So 23rd of February, we've got internal audit progress reports. We've got internal audit strategy, got risk management and treasury assets, and we'll go through June, September there. With the growth and with the governance scrutiny, as we know, that's virtually your agenda is basically written for us, isn't it? Not much more we can squeeze in, but I'm assuming you've got nothing you want to change on that one.
No, Chairman, although just to note the meeting on the 24th of November, the statement of accounts is unlikely to be on the agenda because of we've got a delay in the signing of those accounts due to a statutory override potentially around the infrastructure assets at the moment, so that might change a little bit.
So will that be going to the February when
That'll
it's
go
a
to
special
February,
meeting?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so that's fine. We'll get updates
Yeah.
there. Thank you for that. Next one is growth and development. So as it stands, January you've got the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and as it stands, the hedges and hedgerows from the borough. Obviously, that's the major item we just said. March at the moment, it's got one item there: fair and development and a space. And July, review of the crematorium and a space. In September, at the moment, open for the many major items that currently Councillor Clark is wanting to write as we speak. So, do you want to talk about your proposal to potentially change around that?
Well, yeah, I haven't formulated the right phraseology or wording, but just the actual subjects, which could or could not be related. They could either be taken as part of a wider review or separately. Only this afternoon we realised, and this is, it's all gone under the radar. This is new planning legislation that relates to permitted development rights, which as ward councillors in Radcliffe-on-Trent, it was only because a resident had brought a particular application to our notice, we realised that a lot of these permitted development right, I was going to say applications, but they're not necessarily, projects don't even come to the notice of ward members. And so unless a resident raises them with a ward member, then there's no opportunity to even comment on them. And this relates to what are called PAA, which as far as I remember is pre-application advice. And they can be quite substantial developments. This particular one was putting a complete new floor on a current dwelling. So it's not as though you're just adding a front porch or some minor extension. This was an absolutely major proposal under the new legislation. So I think what I'm coming around to is, firstly, I think we need some training on that. But secondly, we need to investigate how, let's say, members can be made aware of these applications, because I understand that there's other similar legislation that sort of similar type of proposals, which again can be dealt with under permitted development, which don't either come to councillors or come to have the opportunity of coming to committee. And I think this all needs clarifying as to whether they should be coming to committee and whether there should be a mechanism for ward members to be more involved and have the opportunity to comment on these projects and proposals, and ultimately the ability to bring them to committee should they feel that there is a reason to do so. So I think it's the process that needs to be better publicised within the council, and as to whether the process is right, even though it's new legislation. Is the process right within the council?
No, I mean, I agree, but I think it's something needs looking at because it's only one where you sort of talk about it, you realise that we, like I say, we don't get those come forwards. I mean, when I was looking into community development a couple of years ago, and I said, perhaps we still have to contact the borough council, still let them know, still do the form, so that record will be there. Just how that piece of work to do. So, looking at your agenda, to me, it does make sense to put the Fairham and the Rushcliffe Oaks Crematorium in the same items, two significant projects to look at. So it's whether or not. Do you think it's too substantive?
I think they're quite.
Okay.
Well, the Fairham is going to be a big item. I don't know whether I would have thought the crematorium.
We'll be in Charlotte for your advice on this one.
Two things. One, don't forget that July will be the first meeting of the new scrutiny group post-elections. You may well have new members on there. So starting off with two fairly major items, maybe a bit much. The second thing I would say is I think we need to have a scrutiny matrix completed on the topic that you were just discussing, so that we have the opportunity to get officers' views on that. I don't know anything about that whatsoever, so I can't comment on whether I feel is it just a training issue, i.e. is it a new change in legislation that members need to be more aware of, or is there actually something there that we can scrutinise because you can influence the way that those decisions are made internally, and whether they come to committee or whether you get a chance to comment or such like. So I think that's where we need to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's both the training and I think the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from that point clear. So I think obviously not prejudging the scrutiny matrix items you will be writing, and if they are approved by the group. I think at the minute you have got a gap on your agenda for March and July anyway, so that our next meeting would be considering items coming forward from officers and council alike, so we can look at how that slots in. I think obviously the earlier point about the fair about pushing that back to after May, just look at that. If we think there's going to be too substantive to put those two items on one item, it probably does need to stay in March. Look at that, otherwise you're not going to be looking at it till September, which will be quite a way down the process. So, and so maybe we keep that in March then, and when we have new council, there is a briefing given to council, which I think should be part of the induction anyway, with the substantial development going on in the borough as part of the induction process from Short Shart's already got in hand. So I think at the moment I'd say that we leave that as it is, your work programme. We can always review at the next corporate group with the items that come through the scrutiny matrix, and then we can see if we need to move around from there.
Yeah, the other item that I was going to put forward as well in the matrix relates to not so much to planning permissions, but to the conditions that relate to the proposal during construction work, because it's come to light that there are lots of things that seem to happen whilst construction is taking place that haven't been thoroughly put through for conditions at the time of the planning permission. Therefore, and a good example of that is mud being brought onto the road by construction sites because we haven't been robust enough regarding conditioning, wheel washes, etc. So that's just one example, but I think there are other robust conditions for construction work that we need, and I think it's something for us to look at as to whether we are being robust given the amount of development that is taking place in the borough, because it's not restricted to one development site. I've had it occur on 3 that I'm involved with, so I'm working on the basis that there must be other developments that are incurring similar problems as well.
So obviously we'll wait for those items to come through the matrix and then we can discuss the next meeting. But at the moment then, for what you've got in your agenda, I think if you were happy that we leave the fair and development as it is in March, because if it would go too far back to September, that's way too far down the road in terms of how this construction will be and the development will be going at that stage to perhaps effectively make any change if you wish to. So if we leave that in March, we're happy with at the moment. And like I say, when it gets January, we can obviously look at the next meeting, the items come through. If we do need to make any changes then, but at the moment as it stands, I think we leave that as it is.
I think the Fairham is going to be, literally will be an update, won't it? Because I think houses will only just started coming out of the ground because they're still doing the groundworks infrastructure at the moment. So that will be,
Yeah,
it's going to be going on for years. So
yeah, like I say, development has started. I think, like I say, it's probably then good in March before it's got too far down the line to look at where we are and if things are on the right track. Because if it gets too far down the line, it might be too late to make any suggestions that you wish to. So we're happy to leave that for now in there. And then in July, obviously, at the moment, and we'll see what comes through the scrutiny matrix item, and we go forward from there. So we're happy with that. Yeah. That's good. We look forward to the many scrutiny matrices coming through. That'll keep Charlotte happy. So we move on to community scrutiny group. It's gone. Go on then. There we go.
When I had the joy of doing the highways portfolio at Nottinghamshire County Council, during that period, the leader said that we weren't having officers on that actual development. So I actually volunteered myself on it through Councillor Andy Levine, and I did feedback to officers what was happening within those meetings. And it is a big project, and it is not straightforward. So I do think it'll be a long meeting for that particular subject.
That's great. I really appreciate that feedback on there. So like I think, like I say, it makes more sense not to combine those two in one meeting by looks at it. So if we do leave at March for now, and I say things change, there's nothing concrete set in stone. This is provisional at the moment, and we can look at it in January if things need to change depending on what comes through matrix and timescales. So thank you. We'll keep that as it is then. On to communities. So this is where we've got lots of stuff on the agenda because no one's here from communities to challenge us. As a joke, of course. And January, they've got the Establishment Youth Council we talked about before, and corporate enforcement policy, carbon management plan, environment policy. And that's at the moment, obviously, as you keep saying, the waste strategy, which was on there before I was even chairing it, and is still going for it now. We'll just have to obviously see, depending on what comes from government, when that could potentially go on the items, 2028, 29, we might see. And one thing I think potentially we need to look at is, I mean, when I chaired, we had an update from the police inspector, just where we were against the policing priorities, which is something that used to be a standing item in the old scrutiny structure. I think where we just need to get that back in there as a rolling item to especially with the money that we have got from the Safer Streets funds for Trent Bridge, for example, 250k, just to make sure that that's being spent and the overall policing priorities. I think for me sounds something we should be looking at. If anyone's in agreement with that. Any other comments about the communities work programme? No. Okay, well, if Gareth asks, we'll put lots on the agenda, see if he reads about the meeting and see if we did or not. So I think that's a wrap then, if we're all happy with that as it stands. So that's all the items on the agenda. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Just missed your target there, Charlotte, my 7 minutes. There we go. And look forward to seeing you all in January.